Joining us today from Mumbai is Ratun Lahiri. Ratun will help us decode the ongoing trade war, so to say, between India and the US. Ratun, thank you very much for joining us on Republic TV.
Thank you, Pranav. A pleasure to be here.
Okay. Ratun, as we speak, Donald Trump has earlier today announced that there will be no further negotiations, or he has said that the negotiations have been called off as of now, as we speak. What do you make of this?
I think it's rather unfortunate. It is also unfortunate that we should find ourselves, in this situation, with the United States. Actually, one of India's greatest allies, and the United States should consider India to be one of its greatest allies. A bustling democracy, a country on the rise, 1.4 billion people, the diaspora, the Indian American diaspora in the US contributing so much, to their educational, their business and their political life. And to, if you had even asked me a month back, I couldn't even in my dreams have imagined a scenario as we are seeing today. It's very, very unfortunate.
True.
And very short-sighted, if I may add.
Absolutely. I mean, is Trump in any way jeopardizing the historic ties that India and America had developed over years prior to post the MTCR, the Missile Technology Control Regime, wherein we actually saw that US denied missiles to India, US was closer to Pakistan, and then we had this amazing decades wherein India and US were getting closer as allies. Is he jeopardizing the historic ties?
I would think so. But, today, as I look back at the history of the India in the Indo-US relationship, I really must ask myself, has the United States ever, been a true partner to India? India was a champion of the non-aligned movement in those days. And even through the 1971 war, prior to that, India has never really been helped at any crucial juncture in India's history. India has never really been helped by the US, in that way. But over the last couple of years, over the last couple of decades, as you very rightly pointed out, there were closer ties. I think there was an understanding within the American political leadership, particularly starting in the Clinton years, or what the Indian diaspora adds to America, and what India as a nation, and how India as a nation can be a true partner to America. And I think it took decades, to build, because there was distrust on both sides. America has always been worried about India being closer to Russia than America. And India has always, in a way, not liked the fact, that America has, in the past, always sided, with Pakistan. Though at the moment, there is no link between India and Pakistan, to couple the two, even during the recent Operation Sindoor, I think was very unfortunate. And then, of course, things have just taken a downfall since then.
When we're talking about Russia, he specifically mentioned that India is trading with Russia, and as a result of which the additional 25% tariffs have been slapped. Is he singling out India? Why is he not doing anything against China? Why is he not doing anything against EU, who are also, and he himself is in fact importing several items from Russia? Why is he not punishing any other countries but India?
I think this is... I think this is this is primarily two things. One is that, he's punishing India, because he thinks he can get away with it, and he thinks India will capitulate the way, frankly, the UK has and the European Union has. He has not reckoned with the strength of India. He has not reckoned with thousands of years of civilization. He has not reckoned with a proud people and a country on the rise, and on the rise in a significant way. This moment in time had to come, Pranav, because India, is rising. And when you are under when you're under the radar, people don't consider you. But the moment you raise your head above the parapet, people look at you. And I think this moment had to come, but I think it has come sooner than one expected. And as regards the question of why he's singling out India, frankly, I think this is double standards beyond compare. I mean, of course, they are buying, as you have rightly pointed out, their own, goods and services from Russia. So is the EU, so is everybody else. But India, because he just wants to make an example of India, that's all. And I also think it's got into a little bit of a personal issue, between him and our Prime Minister, our Indian Prime Minister. And of course, as Indians, we back our Prime Minister. There's no question about that.
Ratun, yesterday when we were talking, you were talking about US. I mean, US is the largest economy of the world, and then compared to that, India is a relatively smaller economy. But is there any way, the rise that India has over the past about a decade or so, do you think that could be in any way a threat to the US dominance across the globe? Is that one of the reasons?
Course. Yes, of course. So let me tell you what has happened. There is this, I'll give you one or two small examples. There is an agency called DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, of the United States government that appropriates, they believe that the best technology anywhere in the world, particularly in the US, must be appropriated for their military use. So they have DARPA, right? So Prime Minister Modi and our Indian government, started IDEX, Innovation for Defense Excellence in 2018. And lo and behold, last year, DARPA and IDEX tied up for IndusX. And, many of our Indian startups, our defense startups, are being wooed by the Pentagon and wooed by DARPA, to come and present, in the US. They realize where the technology is, where the going is, where things are going. I think on a broader policy level, on a business level, technology level, they see where India is. And I think also Operation Sindoor and the advancement in Indian deep tech, has really shown a mirror to the US. The fact that we can accomplish what the US does at a fraction of the cost. There's no doubt, and I shall be foolish if I say that the best innovation in the world is not coming from the US. It is the US. The US by far has an unparalleled economy, innovation par excellence. They have everything going for them. But India is certainly on the rise, and I think that is certainly causing a lot of, raising a lot of eyebrows, in the US. And this had to be.
I mean, one of the things that, in fact, analysts or the so to say, strategic affairs experts have been pointing out that the US diplomatic relations are not dictated by an individual, but there is an entire doctrine which is in place. Contrary to India, where the strategic relations have been driven by personalities, but in this case, we are seeing a Donald Trump, and then there are voices within the US who are probably warning him that okay, this is detrimental to USA. Do you think what he's doing is kind of autocratic and going against the established US doctrine, so to say, as far as his dealing with India is concerned?
Well, Pranav, I don't have a mirror into their, internal ways of working. But this I will say, that a presidential term in the US is 4 years. We are 6 months into a 4-year term. We have another 3.5 years to live through. But whatever happens, in these 3.5 years, and whatever amends are made later, when steps like this are taken, by the US president, when statements such as the fact that India is a dead economy, when it is one of the fastest, when it is the fastest rising economy, in terms of, and one of the bright spots of the world, when statements like this are made, they're not forgotten in a hurry. It will take decades, of goodwill, from the US side, to overcome this, whoever the next president is.
Okay, how do you view US-Pakistan relations or the bond homing, so to say?
That is another puzzle. Pakistan is a democracy, and I wish them well. But the fact that the leader of their military establishment can be called for a 2-hour lunch to the White House instead of the prime minister of a democratically elected government, by the President of the United States, speaks volumes about how foreign policy is being conducted by the United States. That's my personal opinion. I rest my case.
Okay. As someone who's stayed in the in the EU zone for such a long time, in UK for such a long time, and someone who's been observing geopolitics, I want to understand how has India's response been different to Trump's tariffs as against an EU's response?
India simply didn't capitulate. We will not throw our farmers, our fishermen and women, our agricultural, our folks in the agricultural sector, our dairy farmers under the bus. We will not do so.
Okay.
This is a self-reliant, a strong India. We will not just capitulate just because we have to. Our foreign policy, every policy that is made by the Indian government is for the people of India. And that India is a sovereign country, and we are not going to be dictated to by another country, whoever that might be.
Correct. And do you think that will affect, or is there any way India can, make up for the losses that we might incur if tariffs are accepted the way they are right now? If there is any loss in the India-US trade, how do you think, India can make up for those deficits, so to say?
I will say this, that this is, we have just finished raising a $150 million fund globally, saying this is a once in a generation opportunity.
Okay.
And to the global, globally. And I'm saying this today on your show, Pranav, to us, to all fellow Indians, this is a once in a generation opportunity for us. There is no doubt that this is a moment of reckoning. We can either capitulate or we can stand up proud and tall and build for India. Let us show the world who we are. Let us seize this opportunity. We are resilient. We are industrious. We are innovative. Let's show us, and we are a millennia-old civilization. Let us show the world who we are. There will be pain. Of course there will be pain, but collectively we can take it forward. I think the government will have to look at the sectors. Certainly, we've had figures, thrown about around 2%, 5% of GDP. Yes, of course. Yes, there will be an impact, especially, and it's very unfortunate as we march towards becoming the world's third largest economy. But nothing is undoable, when the spirit is strong, and we will do it.
Okay. So when you say that it's an opportunity, let's say I'm an investor, I'm a young investor who wants to bet big on India right now, either via mutual funds or via SIPs or stock, or I want to start a business. 10 years from now, what picture do you see?
A rising India in every way. From this third fund, I can speak for myself. We are investing in defense tech. I'm just back from Bangalore day before yesterday. And you see the corridors, the aerospace corridors being built. You see the Apple facilities being built there, for production of iPhones. You see everything that is going on, in not just in Bangalore, this is, or in and around Bangalore, but all over India. This is, it's like taking, the genie out of the box. This is an economy on the rise. Most of all, what our strength is our people, our young population, willing to learn, willing to understand, willing to, move forward. I'll give you a small example. I was staying at a hotel I was staying at the Ritz-Carlton in Bangalore. There was a small issue. I spoke to them. We had everybody coming to ask to understand, and they said, "You're so right, ma'am. We will make amends." It was quietly done. I could just see the yearning for learning, in those young professionals. Same thing, I was in Miami Ritz-Carlton a couple of months ago. People are not bothered. There's an issue. Just write off another $500, $200. It just goes on. It just shows you the difference in attitude, of what is going on. Sure. That is the spirit of India, an India that is willing to learn, willing to move forward, willing to participate in the growth of India. And that is our biggest strength.
So if we have to say that Donald Trump is probably decoupling US from India right now for the time being, from an economy that is on the rise, what does the US really stand to lose by this souring of relations, so to say?
Well, for a start, the goodwill of 1.4 billion people, and I'm sure a large section of the Indian diaspora in the US, President Trump came in with a lot of goodwill, from many Indians, in terms of that. So this is certainly not helping. I understand the America First policy, but every country, must put their country first. And, and I think negotiations should be done in an atmosphere of mutual respect, and honor. You cannot trample another country, and put your country first, because that is very short-sighted in the long term. It never wins.
Okay. Ratun, I want to bring your notice to something. I mean, on one side, he is saying that Indian economy is dead. The other side, he is actually slapping tariffs and taking every action that might, put Indian economy in a short-term trouble, so to say. But at the same time, Donald Trump, as the builder, Donald Trump, as the real estate giant, has been investing in India. Is that duplicity? Is probably Donald Trump, the president, not able to separate himself from Donald Trump, the businessman?
I think so too. Running a country has many, many, many layers to it. It is not like running a business. And I think this is the whole thing. I mean, you cannot throw a whole world into turmoil by just slapping tariffs, willy-nilly, on the whole world, and then expecting others to come and, basically capitulate. I think President Trump and his team, need to realize that we are living in a multipolar world. This is no longer the dominance of the US alone. Yes, the US is the world's largest economic power. Yes, the US is a superpower, but truly this is a multipolar world. Even in a family, however, wealthy one may be, a successful one may be, if one wants to get along with the rest of the family, you need to take family members along. You need to show people respect. You need to carry people with you. Otherwise, there comes a time when you're all alone, you're isolated, and there's nobody with you at your time of need.
Do you see that India, China, Russia could be emerging as a bloc to counter the US?
Well, the very fact that President Putin will be visiting India soon, speaks volumes. The fact that Prime Minister Modi is going to China, for the first time after the unfortunate Galwan incident, also speaks volumes. I think these are very powerful statements, in and of themselves. And I think every country realizes, look, the EU has signed a trade deal with the US, but if you see the writing, in fact, the writing on the wall, I wouldn't even say, covertly, if you see the writing on the wall, there has not been much happiness over it. People are not content with the deal that has been signed. And as for the UK, we all know that the UK, has been not quite itself since Brexit in 2016. The UK was one of the first countries to sign, with the US. But India is not the UK, and never will be, and India is not on UK's trajectory. And I think the US needs to realize that.
Okay.
That's the basic difference.
What about the US investor? The US investor, in fact, was bullish on the India story. What are some of the challenges that you face in convincing or talking to, probable investors with the emerging equation? Where is the world putting their money with the current geopolitical situation?
I think a wise investor would also understand that, a large domestic market has a very big part to play in a country's growth. The good thing about the India growth story is it is not limited to pockets of India. So it is not just Bangalore or Mumbai or the national capital region, that are hubs of activity. You have hubs of activity from Palakkad in Kerala. You have hubs of activity from Jaipur, from Bhubaneswar. We have 3 investments from our fund from Bhubaneswar. Tim Draper, came in his private jet to Bhubaneswar, sat, for a 2-hour meeting with a startup, wrote a check and went back.
Wow.
That is the power of India today. It's not restricted to pockets of activity. It is all over. It's pan-India. That's the first thing. And I think smart investors recognize that. That's smart global investors recognize that, number one. Number 2, smart global investors also recognize that precedent terms, whether it be in the US, UK, India, anywhere in any democracy, have a limited span, right? Things can happen in 3.5 years, things will change. That's the other thing. And most importantly, I think smart global investors also do their homework and they realize how big the Indian domestic market is. India is a domestic market, the Indian growing middle class, how big that is. And in fact, if I were an American, organization at this point, I would want to sell goods and services into India, and I would work that the Indian government should not be short-sighted and block me with tariffs, because that's a market I wouldn't want to let go of. Remember what happened to Coca-Cola and IBM, etc., in the 1980s, once they had to leave India?
Okay.
And how long it took them to come back?
Absolutely.
No multinational today, American multinational today, will ever want to, not participate in the Indian market.
Okay. Would you like to share some numbers with us in terms of if really India has to, where does this, or rather than numbers, I would say, with the current impasse, so to say, do you see this ending anytime soon? And will it affect the Indian economy in the longer run, or this is just a small blip and it is all going to get over and we are still going to see an India shining story?
It is worrying. It is certainly worrying, when one gets, and I'm not, I will not sugarcoat my words. When one is bullied, by the world's by the world's superpower, it is worrying, especially when India is on the rise, when we are marching towards, a dream of becoming the world's third largest economy, it does derail things a bit. There is no doubt about that. But the point also is, this is also a time for the government to come up with policy, to make it additionally possible, to make additional reforms, to really open up sectors, to make sure, to give further, incentives to startups, to the whole startup world, to the manufacturing world, to really, really give that, that propulsion to India. I'm not negative at all about what's happening. As I see, it's a challenge, and a challenge can be met in two ways. One can capitulate, as most of the world has done, or one can just take it up, and say, right, it's pain in the short term, but we will prevail in the long term. And I think if we do that, over the long term, we will also become globally competitive.
Okay. Ratun, last question. If you got, let's say, as probably a representative of India, you got a small meeting with Donald Trump and tell him what, give him a earful, so to say, on what he's doing with India, what would you tell him right now?
I wouldn't give him a earful. I would just tell him, President Trump, you have come in with a lot of goodwill, a lot of goodwill from 1.4 billion Indians. We really cheered you on. We've been an ally of the US for so long, and we are natural allies, as fellow democracies, as a rule of law, as fellow democracies, as a young, vibrant population, that is just raring to go, as a bustling Indian diaspora that contributes so much to American life. Come, partner with us, shake our hand. We are willing to tango with you. But this is not the way. We don't respond to threats. We are, a country that is millennia in the making, with centuries and centuries of civilization. We do not like being dictated. Then you see a very different side of us. But at heart, we are happy, good people. Come and partner with us. That's all I would say.
Wonderful. Ratun, thank you very much for giving us your time. We'll keep coming back to you. If Donald Trump really continues with what he's doing right now and whenever the situation evolves. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranav. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ratun. Thanks.